oh my gosh, we do not understand the market. We don't understand the way Japanese people and consumers are thinking. We don't understand the social constructs. We don't understand how they make decisions. And the result of that is that the majority of businesses are really underperforming in the Japanese market.
Hello and welcome back. I'm Brian Rios from Wahl+Case, and I'm joined today by Nate Hernig. How are you doing today, Nate?
Doing well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Can you give the audience a little bit of an idea of what you do and then also a little bit of what Humble Bunny does?
Yes. So I'm the CEO of Humble Bunny. Humble Bunny started in 2007. It was originally an outlet for my freelance design work, and things snowballed, and I accidentally created a business. And now we primarily do performance marketing work, primarily for brands coming into Japan. And that's sort of the nut that we've cracked. And our primary offer is helping businesses who are really having trouble taking off in the Japanese market to improve their performance.
Nice. And so would you say, what is maybe the percentage of domestic clients versus international clients that you guys are seeing?
It's kind of a complex question because a lot of brands are international brands, but the businesses are domestic in the sense that they have a branch here or a proper base here, right? So international flair, international element, pretty much all of them. We do sometimes have very authentically Japanese clients, but there's always some international element to it, usually.
Yeah, and so the main topic I want to talk to you about today is really around that. It's kind of like the differences in digital marketing in Japan and things that you found over your time at Humble Bunny and accidentally creating this business, maybe some of the most interesting things that have come up. And so the first question I want to ask are just, what are the biggest challenges that you've seen for brands when entering Japan?
The biggest challenges for the brands is really just figuring out the market. The language alone is hard enough for most brands. So there's already this element of who speaks Japanese that we can get us to help with this, right? But then the extra layer, the deeper layer is oh my gosh, we do not understand the market. We don't understand the way Japanese people and consumers are thinking. We don't understand the social constructs. We don't understand how they make decisions. And the result of that is that the majority of businesses are really underperforming in the Japanese market. We've seen this so much that we started doing research and we did some surveys, and it's an ongoing number that we're calculating. We're always adding into it, always informing the data. But the current number is that 96.9% of businesses that are trying to come into the Japanese market and be successful are underperforming what they're doing globally from a standpoint of ROAS, conversion rates, or cost per acquisition. 96.9. It's insane.
Yeah, that's true.
So we knew the number was going to be high when we started the research. We didn't know it was going to be that high. That's a big problem.
Yeah.
So that's what we're trying to induct and catalyze more businesses into the 3.1%. That's sort of our mission.
So when you say that 3.1%, what are the things that you're doing to help get them there?
Well, a lot of businesses are coming in and they're saying, we get a lot of inquiries. And it usually starts with a platform conversation. They say, do you do ads? Or, yeah, we do ads. Do you do marketplace e-commerce, right? Sometimes there's questions that are do you do ads on Amazon? And then it's great to think about channels, but at the end of that conversation, there's always going to be pressure on us as an agency to create sales. It's not just about optimizing a channel or optimizing a platform. It's about the end flag post, which is the sales that come out of that. So when we get those inquiries, we start, yes, we can do that channel. But more importantly, what are your conversion rates? And what sort of sales targets are you going for? Because without understanding what's happening under that conversation, we can't offer what's important for them, right? And that's where a lot of our energy goes. We look at the underlying conversion rates. Sometimes we have clients who, let's use EC as an example, e-commerce. We'll have a client who's getting 10% conversion rate. Let's talk about ads. You're getting a great conversion rate, right? Maybe there's not a lot we need to do there. In another scenario, a day later, oh, let me check our conversion rate because I don't know. And they come back to us the next day and it's oh, it looks like our conversion rate is 0.2%. And we're like, okay, let's not talk about ads right now. Let's talk about something else. So that's where we provide value, is starting with that conversion rate. Yeah.
So you're looking at what is the result and then kind of building strategy around basically like where you want to get and then like what are the steps to get there? Because maybe it's not actually what they're inquiring about.
Yeah. Because we've made that mistake along the years, you know, like sometimes clients, they come in, they're confident. They're like, hey, we want SEO. Can you do SEO? Yeah, we can do SEO. SEO contract. A year later, they're like, where are all the conversions? And we're like, we need to focus on conversion. You know, I called you about that over the summer or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you have to. I mean, it's a marketer's responsibility to go in and say, like, let's focus on what you really need. You know, so that's where our solutions come in, and we say no one else is really creating a solution that directly attacks conversion, and that's what we're trying to offer to the market.
Nice. What are some of those solutions?
So our sort of flagship product and framework that we use is something called Localize. Note that localize sounds like I'm botching the translation like a Japanese person would. That's what localization is. It's like the alterations of things based on the market, right? So it's obviously all about localizing. We call it localize. And localize is a framework that we use to first understand where we need to place our attention in order to elicit purchase or elicit a decision from a Japanese consumer. And then localize we also use on the execution level when we're building out pages or building out ad strategies or doing creative work. We use localize to create messages. So localize is kind of like our flagship sort of framework. And the dream is to get every marketer in Japan to understand what localize is and just get clarity and be able to use localize, because a lot of marketers in Japan can speak for days about how we need to do this in Japan. We need to do this. We need to do this. And it feels like no one's listening to them. So it's also a mechanism to educate everyone in the chain of stakeholders to say, this is what we need in Japan in order to get the result that we want.
Nice. And so what is kind of the foundation of localize? Like when you mentioned this framework, how did you build that out and what are the elements there?
So the company was started in 2009, and we really became more of a marketing performance company. We started making that transition around 2013, 2014, right? And since that time, we've been obviously working on marketing performance projects and learning. About halfway through that, we developed something called TrueTrack, which is a system that we use for analyzing data, because we knew that we couldn't be just reading data off a report. We needed to be doing deeper analysis. So we built a system to both educate our team, but also to make sure that our output was strong. Over all the years and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these TrueTrack analyses, we started learning things that were working or not working, right? We tried things over, we had 80, as of right now, 84 clients, around 250 contracts in total over the history of the company. So there's a lot of data, there's a lot of learning, there's a lot of putting things out there and seeing what's working. So the culmination of all of that is localize, testing things out, seeing how they affect the performance of the brand, and then bringing those things together and saying, how do we distill this out into something simple that the broader market can use, that we can give back to the broader market? And that's localized. That's where it came from.
Nice. And so when we talked about it before, you mentioned kind of the 8 lenses being like the way that localize kind of comes together and you're able to leverage the framework. So can you tell me a little bit about those 8 lenses?
Yeah. So what we need is, we first need to understand how to create decision, right? How do we get the Japanese people to develop certainty that our solution is actually going to be the right solution? And what we've discovered over the years is that there's no single lane, there's no single approach to it, right? There are actually a number of factors that, when cumulatively brought together, and when you're conveying your product across those lenses, you've built essentially the ultimate base of certainty and decision, right? And so that's where the 8 lenses exist, right? So there are 8 of them. So do you want me to go through them?
Yeah, if you could.
I like to start with one that's fairly straightforward and that people can kind of understand. So the first one I'll talk about is called detail. Detail is all about zooming in on the product and showing more aspects, more angles, the build quality of it. If it's apparel, for example, what kind of functions does it have? How are the seams double stitched, right? Is the elastic thin or is it thick? How can you show the texture of the fabric, right? If you have something that's really soft, you want to be able to show that. So zooming in and being able to showcase that product in a more complete way is detail.
Wait. So I want to do you feel like these lenses are really specific to Japan, or would you say they kind of apply everywhere? Can you just give me, I guess, a little bit more information on the lenses themselves before we go into each one?
Okay.
Just so we kind of have like a our lens to view them through.
Yeah. So the really cool thing about the lenses is that the challenge in Japan is not necessarily to be Japanese. There's a little bit of that, but I don't have a number for this, but you could easily say that 75% of the elements of localize and 75% of the lenses just apply to the human condition, right? Like, if you're not sure about buying something, where do we go as humans to build confidence that it's going to be the right thing, right? Oh, let's go read reviews. That's the same in Japan, right? Oh, I saw this on TV. That's our lens of scale. That's the same in Japan, right? But there's something valuable about just being able to say, here are 8. Here they are, right? Simple, right in front of your face, right? Now that we've said them, now let's start talking about it, right? And of course, there are elements of Japan inside of this because of Japan's kind of social structure and the conservatism of Japan, right? You might need to go deeper into these lenses. But I think what's really interesting, something that I kind of casually speak to here and there with my team or with others, is like, if you could build a marketing strategy in the Japanese market that was killer, you could probably just reuse it around the world and feel pretty good about it, right? It's kind of an interesting like first market, because if you make it here, your marketing message and your general value proposition that you're putting out there for your product and services is probably going to be better, right? So it's not completely Japanese. Part of our job as marketers is not to just focus on culture, but to focus on the human condition, right? Which is like, fundamentally, humans want to be loved and want to live a nice life and have financial freedom or whatever. So it's
thick elastic.
Thick elastic, yeah. So that it's not going to get loose on them. I don't know how we're going to tie that in the final cut, but yeah.
So it's just linear for the most part. But
okay.
So the reason that I kind of asked that was because there's 2 things I want to say actually. So the first is that the reason I asked was because just hearing you talk about detail, the first lens reminded me of like there's like in Ogilvy on advertising. That's like one of the things he specifically talks about is like is like going to like I think it was like a car company and just literally asking them how they make the car, and like then just writing that as like that was the copy, was like this is how they make this car. And just and he kind of was like a very big proponent of like the sort of
Ogilvy
editorial.
was Japanese. Did you know that?
No.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, he loved Japan though. In the book, he specifically said like they're like Japan is going to be a great advertising market because they're like really learning. It was a really old book. But the other thing I wanted to say was that like going back to like if something works here, it'll work everywhere. In like you could feel confident in the way that it's working.
Yeah.
And so one of the stories that I like to go back to that a marketer here told me is that he was working for Microsoft at the time, and he went to like a big like Microsoft party here, and it wasn't Bill Gates, but it was the CEO of Microsoft after Bill Gates, whose name I don't remember. But he thanked, and maybe it was Bill Gates, but he thanked Japan for being the market that made Microsoft what it was, Microsoft Office what it was, Microsoft Windows what it was, because the level of detail that they would request. So like if one shade of green changed from like Windows 98 to Windows XP, people would be livid. Like they would get so many complaints from Japan that they would have to like look into that with that level of detail into the product to make sure that there were going to be no complaints. So like they really thanked Microsoft really thanked Japan for being that detail oriented and detail focused. So I think the first lens being detail makes sense.
Yeah. Another aspect of detail is also like specifications or any sort of statistics around the product or service. So a lot of the lenses have layers to them. So, but that's detail. Shall I go to the next one?
Yes, please.
Okay. So another one is durability. Durability is interesting. Durability has a little bit of a Japanese angle to it, in one sense. The basic aspect of durability is all about, is the product or service durable? Is it of quality? Is it reliable, right? That's kind of like an easy to grasp concept. The more complex Japanese aspect of durability is, does it durably fit into the social schemes and the relationships of the Japanese market, right? So part of it is really like, can Japanese people see it contributing value in their life, in their day-to-day, right? So I was talking to someone the other day about thermos mugs, and this is a little bit more about product market fit, right? But in the States, it's very much a car culture in a lot of ways. And we have these massive thermoses that we drink out of, right? But you're not going to be able to sell a thermos that's that big to a Tokyo OL who's riding the train every morning. Like, it just doesn't work, right? So that's an aspect of durability, right?
Yeah.
Like, does the product actually fit into the lifestyle and the ebb and flow of Japanese culture, and right? So that's another aspect of durability that's a little bit more conceptual. Right?
So it's funny that you bring that up specifically with the thermos example, because like the Stanley mugs, the Stanley cups were like super popular this last year in America. And they sell those in Japan. Like I think I've seen them at Tokyo Hands and stuff. I don't know how well they're selling, but I've never seen them anywhere in the world. Like I mean, out in my life in Japan. And so I can't imagine it's the level it is in America. Like it was mentioned on SNL and stuff there.
Yeah, I can't speak to Stanley's product lineup, but you know, I know that at home, my wife loves mugs. I have no idea what it is, but she's Japanese. We have like 1 million mugs, and every year she buys a new one. And I'm like, we have them.
My thing is, I buy a lot of like steel cups, so the kind of the thermos thing. Yeah, like they
the double walled.
Yeah, the double walled steel cups. Yeah, I love those.
Yeah, they're great.
I have 3. I'm getting another one soon.
You're getting another one?
I'm planning on it already. My parents are coming from America, and I specifically requested one that I like looked up. So I'm excited to get it,
Nice. On the subject of thermoses, right?
Yeah.
Just make sure they fit
into my
market.
cupboard,
Make sure they're big for your non-Japanese family.
Yeah, I gotta be honest though, like, so talking about that fit, I have like one cup, like one thermos double wall steel cup, and my wife hates it. Because it's JAMA, right? She like specifically says it's super JAMA, so it's always in the way. And it doesn't matter like if it's in the washing machine or if I put it on the side. I have to hide it so she doesn't see that that it's there. Because otherwise she'll like knock it over and like get angry at me saying it's like too in the way.
Yeah, I think we've all got anecdotal stories. Like the time that my Japanese friends came to my house and they brought small cups as a present, and they literally said, "You guys don't have any small cups, so we're gifting you small cups." I was like, oh yeah. And I've been in Japan long enough now that I actually really like small cups now. Like I used to have these big ones, and I'm like, if I'm gonna buy a cup, I gotta buy a big one. But I like the small ones. Like, you know, maybe that's my age. I don't know.
It is great.
But, yeah. Durability is one of the lenses. Another lens is social. So we talk about social in a lot of the lenses. There's a little bit of overlap, you know. A lot of them, it's kind of like 2 birds with 1 stone sort of concept, right? A lot of the lenses you can kind of overlap together as you build your marketing strategy, right? But social is all about acceptance and status. So, you know, being a very discerning and conservative market, brands that tend to establish themselves tend to garner a little bit more trust, right? And with that trust and with that establishment, they also start to move into an area where they're actually establishing status, right? So, for example, there are a lot of luxury brands that come into the market, right? But even if a Japanese person believes something might be more like cuter, let's say it's like a bag, they might think a bag is cuter, right? And we might hypothesize that in most markets, the design is going to sell the product. It's not going to be as much like that in the Japanese market. If that brand is unknown, even if it's cuter, the intrinsic value socially that a consumer will receive as a result of buying the one that's branded, that's known, and the looks of envy. No one is outwardly individualistic in Japan, but I believe everyone is internally and intrinsically individualistic. They're happy and they're conscious of the look of envy that they might get from having the brand piece. So that's social. Like social has a really big play in the Japanese market. That might sound superficial. I won't say too much to that, but
Yeah, it's an element though.
it is an element. Yeah.
It's something that I think, yeah, I mean, this is again anecdotal. I mean, I don't just want to throw my wife under the bus like so much, but she totally. I remember when I first like met her, she was just like, oh, like I really don't care about what other people think about me, but I only wear like Supreme and Palace and Antisocial Social Club or whatever. And I was like,
Okay.
that's like very clearly caring what people think about you. And she's just like, well, I don't want to look like I don't want to look like I only wear cheap clothes. Like I don't want to look like I only shop at Uniqlo or something. I need something to like kind of like brighten it. And yeah, I do think there's an element of that. And I think that what's also funny about that is like being a foreigner, being a gaijin in Japan, a lot of times my wife will like tell me like I don't like that shirt, but I think you could wear it because like you're a foreigner and like you have more of a pass in some of like those social elements. Like if I'm just wearing like only Uniqlo clothes, like I can get away with it more than maybe she feels she could.
Yeah. I think that's it's interesting. I think that the deeper you get into Japan, the less forgiveness you're going to get for being non-Japanese, right? My wife doesn't even see me as a foreigner anymore because she tells me this all the time because we're always speaking Japanese. I'm not sure if this is a lens, but it is an aspect of the culture, right? That's a good thing, right? As long as you kind of have your messaging and your PR and everything in order, right? So another aspect of social is actually around things that are uncomfortable, right? A lot of brands might come into the Japanese market talking about disruption, right? Disruption, for anyone who knows Japan or has worked in a Japanese space, just feels uncomfortable somehow. Like, what are you going to disrupt, right? Like my relationships, the social order of things, right? There's a little bit of social carefulness that we need, like in bringing our brands and our missions and our visions into the Japanese market. Another big one on a consumer level is self-expression. Express yourself, right? Well, as we talked about earlier, expression is different in Japan. It's often intrinsic or more passive or more deduced externally by the way they act or the way they dress or the way they show up, right? It's not loud. You know, you can't sell as many pink versions of your shirt in Japan as you could overseas. It's a much more neutral color palette in Japan as well, right? Expression is just not as big of a thing. So brands need to think about that as well, like the social lens of their vision and their mission as well, like what they stand for, right? Also, social is just product of choice, though. This is really, really straightforward for a lot of us. Testimonials, star ratings, these sorts of things, right? Works globally, works really strongly in Japan, right? So that's the social lens. Moving on to the fourth lens is aesthetic. So aesthetic on a product level, aesthetic on a brand level. How does the aesthetic of the product or the aesthetic of the brand communicate? Some of the really obvious ones are things like the packaging, right? Japan's an amazing market for packaging. You could come to Japan just because you like packaging and just be happy, right? That's aesthetic. That's the experience, right? Another aspect of aesthetic is this monozukuri, right? This concept that this attention to detail and love or passion towards the craft, right? Not even because, the law of diminishing returns. They're, artisans and creative people and like they're going to these massive lengths, not because they need to, but because there's beauty in going to such lengths just to make your product more special. Another aspect of aesthetic is related to those artisans themselves, highlighting their lives or highlighting their approach and these sorts of things. These can add value to the brand, right? If you have a figure, it could be the president of the company with just, a big audacious goal, or it could be the artisan making the product, right? In the factory or in his little studio or whatever it is. But All of these things are aesthetic. So considering the aesthetic of your product, not just in does it fit the market, like is it the right color kit, you know, again, not bright pink maybe,
Yeah.
but a muted pink maybe, right? Or something a little more neutral. That's also aesthetic, right? But yeah, so aesthetic's a really interesting one because it has multiple layers to it, right?
Yeah, I think I think aesthetic specifically, you see, it's funny because I remember when I first came to Japan, being on the train and seeing ads, it's like almost overwhelming, right? And especially coming from America, the through line of most marketing and advertising is really about the product, but emotion. It's almost like it's really more like if you see a Budweiser commercial, it's like this is what America used to be. You know what I mean? That's kind of like the feeling of like a Budweiser commercial. Here, it's really almost. It felt to me, at least, when I first came here, like it was almost all aesthetics, right? Like it's all very visual, very like how can we just be memorable in the moment and like grab the attention that we need in that split second. Like the creative is really where like the mind like gets caught versus in America, it's like, you know, it's like kind of slow, like horses moving, something like that. And so, yeah, I do think that the levels of that, of aesthetics is like an interesting thought too, because on the other side of that, like you were talking about the artisans, and one of the companies that we work with is called Wataki, and they're like they used to be called Kindwear, and it's like an old suit brand, and they have like this really long history. They're the first people to like bring like double-breasted suits into Japan, and like, and really showcasing that history was at the core of kind of their messaging. So I do think, yeah, it's an interesting thought, and I really I can see where that comes into play here.
Okay, so the fifth lens is local. By the way, these are not in any specific order, hierarchy or anything like that, but local is all about being local. It's fairly straightforward. Japanese people will organically feel a little bit more comfortable with you if you're showing up here. You know, a lot of brands, they come into the market, they're like, we're going to test the market. However you want to do it is fine, but you know, fundamentally, if you're testing a market, you should test it at its utmost and then evaluate based on that performance. But a lot of these things, just testing fundamentally doesn't give you enough time to establish your ceiling. Let's say you have a ceiling of conversion. You need time to establish all of these elements for your brand. So you can come in and test over 3 months, but if you're only able to establish 20% of, for example, localize, then your lens, not to use that, I don't know if I want to use that word, but your reference point of saying this is good or not is 20% of its potential. You still have to 5x it. That's your real potential, right? Not to mention just the basic skill sets of the people you're employing for you, right? Like making sure you have the right execution framework for those platforms, right? Underneath the creative, right? So being local is one of the hardest ones to establish. It's the one that takes a little bit more time. Ways that we've done this for brands in the past is we've said, possibly aesthetically, the identity of the brand doesn't really fit. It's too vibrant, it's too flashy. The aesthetic design of the logo or the graphic identity maybe doesn't really fit with the aesthetic senses of the Japanese market. So what we do is we say, let's get you a Japanese designer to rework this for you. Let's do some renaming so that it fits more phonetically into the market. We did that, and then we actually had this really great, it's my next lens, but we were able to certify the result because the work that we did, the rebranding work that we did was featured in a Japanese design periodical, which gets printed once a year. It's kind of like a select magazine of highlighted design from the Japanese market. So now we're actually getting credibility too, right? And this rings really strong with the Japanese consumer. So being local, thinking about how it's going to fit into the local market, but also using designers. If you're an apparel brand, design something locally. Get something manufactured locally, right? Bump your costs to be able to sell it. It's fine, right? The fact that you're local alone is gonna support the conversion of that, right? There's also a really important element of the Japanese market, which is physical. Very hard for brands just coming in, but anytime that you can show up at an event or some sort of fair or something, just get yourself analog on the ground in some light way to begin with, that can actually also be really good, right? Because not because you're going to generate a ton of sales from those contacts or from that event, but because you have material to put out into your PR, to put on your website, to show people over the long term, we are local. You can trust us. We're serious about the market. So that's what local is. Next one, certified. So certified is all about getting local seals, stamps, marks, etc., that show that in this market you're showing up. So there's an element of local to that, right? Are you accredited by organizations? Have you won any awards? Even if they're foreign awards, translate the award, put it on your page, right? What experts and authorities are backing your product, right? Influencers are part of this as well. Sponsored by, et cetera, right? So this is certified. Next one, I'll talk about scale. So scale is what associations or larger relationships are you part of, right? A lot of brands in Japan do collaborations. They're huge in Japan. It's all about piggybacking off of the scale of the other brand. It's massive here. So having any collaborations, having an active PR and media strategy, start digital. There are lots of digital platforms for PR that'll help you get a little bit of pickup. It's not going to immediately create sales for you, so you have to manage your expectations. But the fact that you're out there, someone can do a brand search for you and you show up in a myriad of different places, including different media sites, is going to add value and trust over time. Being in the news, being on television, television helps, right? So these are all real things in the Japanese market. Logo grids, especially if you've got Japanese partners or Japanese clients, if you're like a service company, put together a logo grid, right? So that's scale. The last one is process. Process is all about showing the process, right? A lot of brands mistakenly show the final product, but if you have this aesthetic story of who the artisan is and you show the process of carrying it through, and then you show in detail the final product with durability about how the product should be used, that's a full chain application of your marketing message. And that's a big step forward beyond where a lot of companies are doing it. So this is process. It's just how do you do it, right? If you own a service business or like a B2B business, process can also be developing like sub-frameworks, right? We're talking right now about Localize, right? Localize is our framework for managing marketing. And to some clients, they might view Localize as an icon of credibility for us because we've gone to lengths to try to develop this, right? Hopefully they think that we're serious about things, right? That's the general concept, right? If you're a consumer service or a B2B service company and your goal is lead generation, compartmentalize your services, come up with frameworks that explain how you pay attention to quality and you make sure that you're consistent on quality so that Japanese people can make the decision.
So going back to the 96.9% of businesses that feel like they're not having success in the market,
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that survey and then why you think that mentality is like so prevalent here?
Yeah, I mean, the survey itself is a really simple survey, and we're always generating into it. So I'd love to be able to share it with more people in a broader context soon. But essentially what it is, it's just a few questions. It's essentially, are you doing both global and Japanese business, right? Are you conscious of your performance results? Which one is higher? That's it. That's really the entirety of it. And all we're just trying to understand is this IO black and white. Are you doing better here or are you doing better there? Right? And that's really it. And like I said, it comes from a place of this feeling that we all have as marketers that like something's wrong, right? Like we're a bit frustrated, right? Like frustrated at the lack of kind of innovation in the marketing space. And I think a lot of us, like we go through life kind of validating our feelings on things, and we decided let's validate this. Like we can't be the only ones feeling this way. Like, is it actually true? It's anecdotally over the years in lots of qualified conversations, even like this one, we feel validated, but we never had the number, and we just wanted to get that number and put it out there, and we hope that people will be surprised, maybe validate themselves as well. But yeah, it's a very simple number to quantify. Like a lot of us are fucking this up. Can I say that?
Yes. Yeah, it's totally fine.
And something needs to change. You know what I mean? So I was talking with someone the other day, and she told me, and it just sometimes people just need to say things to you for you to be like, yes, it's there, it's at the surface, right? And she said, I feel like the companies that are really doing great things are fundamentally pissed off about something. And I was like, yes. I think a lot of us in the marketers, in the marketing space in Japan, I think a lot of us are sort of like quietly pissed off about the fact that we can't make the marketing result that we want, and that there's so many factors pushing us down, right? The data helps us say like we're not alone, and it helps us show our stakeholders or our bosses or whatever that like this is a real thing. Incoming companies as well, right? It's a framework for having a conversation of credibility, right? So that's where the data comes from, and that's where localize comes from.
Nice. Yeah, one thing I wanted to ask is, so about that, when we talked before, you mentioned, oh shit, I don't know how to ask this, but basically I want you to talk about that mentality of kind of like hitting that wall and then wanting to back out, like feeling like, oh, Japan isn't working as a market, so we got to leave. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and where that hesitation to try to challenge and maybe adapt and localize, that hesitance can kind of come from. I feel like for us, we see it occasionally, like when people are inquiring about the market, they're trying to learn more, and it just seems like maybe the hurdle's a little too big. Yeah, and I want to know maybe like what your take on that is.
I mean, a lot of companies come in and then they try to localize what they have, but the localization is more akin to translation than actual localization, which I think is a good first step. Like get launched, you know? Like it's not bad, right? You know, we don't have to all be so uppity about it. Like let's just get live. Like that part of things I think is important. It's just what's important is the expectations that we have at the phases, right? So if your first phase is translation, then we all need to keep our expectations low because it's a much more complex a market than that. You know, if these super famous cultural psychologists spend their entire lives studying culture and they decide that Japan is like the most uncertainty avoidant culture in the world, and then you come in and say, oh, I'm going to be different, I'm just going to translate my site, like it doesn't work. Like let's not ignore the professionals that have come before us, you know, and let's look at the brands that are actually applying things like the lenses and achieving the results that they want, right? But yeah, I think that it's good to phase your business in, but it's also important to understand that like whatever you've got overseas, elements of it will work, other elements will not, and you're also missing elements. And so being conscious of that, setting your expectations, making sure you're phasing things out, and making sure that you're identifying signals of performance, things are building momentum, I think is important to keep your head level in the Japanese market. A lot of brands are, you know, even in the first year, looking for profit and have this capitalistic mindset. It can work, but it often doesn't, you know? So it really just depends on your brand, but it's going to be a cleaner emotional journey if we understand that the market is different and we should phase and launch over time. And we should be conscious of the signals that we're receiving and answer those and build forward, right? So much easier said than done because it's just 3 months. We have 3 months to make this work, you know? It's not a perfect world. Send them localize. Send them the deck. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nate, for being here. Where can people find out more about Humble Bunny if they want to learn a bit more?
Obviously, our website, humblebunny.com. Our vision and mission for our business is just to empower more people to do marketing the right way, right? Whether they do it through us, whether they do it by themselves, empowered by the frameworks and the concepts that we put out there, we don't care. We just need to bring more people into the 3.1%. A lot of that information is just on the website. We have tons of knowledge on the website. We have discoveries, which I won't go into, but it's, you know, data-backed learnings. We have discoveries. We have our blog. We have information about localize. It's all on the website. So that's a great place to start. You can also follow us on, you know, LinkedIn's a great place to follow us. You can follow me on LinkedIn as well. And also, actually, I encourage people to sign up for my newsletter via the website. I unwrap a lot of the inner workings of things like localize or some of the frameworks that we use internally on the execution level. We call them the True series of frameworks. True VP, True Track won't make sense to you guys, but in my email, I kind of unwrap those so people can use those and yeah, that's where people can find me.
Perfect. I just signed up for the newsletter, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Nate, for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.